Have you ever felt like your mind just won't stop talking? No matter where you are or what you're doing, your thoughts keep racing, sometimes stuck in regret over the past, other times gripped by fear of the future. This is the story of a young man who used to live in that mental whirlwind every single day. He tried everything to calm his mind, but nothing really worked until a long journey led him to a reclusive old man living high up in the mountains. That meeting wasn't some kind of miracle, and it wasn't therapy either. But it gave him a lesson, one that was simple yet deeply profound. And it changed the way he saw the world and himself. If you've ever longed for peace, just one quiet moment in the middle of all that mental noise, then don't look away. Because what you've been searching for might have been inside you all along. Marco was 24 years old and lived in a small village surrounded by mountains and lush green trees. From the outside, his life seemed peaceful, a place where birds sang in the morning, cool breezes rustled through the trees, and people lived slowly and simply. But inside Marco was a completely different world. His mind was never still. Even when everything around him was quiet, his head felt like a city stuck in rush hour, honking horns, crowds of people, and an overload of noise all packed together. His thoughts never took a break. They came and went, overlapping, looping, and refusing to leave. He often asked himself, why do I always feel exhausted even when I haven't done much all day? Why can't I sleep well even when my body is totally worn out? And then he'd sit for hours, staring into nothing, trying to find an answer in all that chaos. Marco didn't have any major problems. He wasn't poor, he wasn't sick, and he wasn't caught up in anything messy. But maybe it was exactly because there wasn't anything specific to fix that the worries in his head felt even more invisible and impossible to hold on to. He thought a lot about the past. Tiny mistakes that everyone else had long forgotten, he still carried with him every day like heavy baggage. He beat himself up over things he said wrong, did wrong, or chose wrong. And when the past wasn't haunting him, his mind would shift to the future, worrying about things that hadn't happened yet, fearing the unknown, imagining endless worst-case scenarios that had a 99% chance of never coming true. Each of Marco's days felt like a quiet battle with himself. He was alive, but he didn't feel like he was really present in his life. Joy seemed to slip right past him. Even when people laughed and joked around him, he would only force a small smile, one that felt empty and fake. Little by little, he forgot what real happiness even felt like. Nights were the hardest. Marco would toss and turn for hours, unable to sleep. It wasn't the noise around him, it was the noise in his own head. He tried, counting sheep, listening to soft music, even reading books, but nothing could quiet the constant tide of thoughts rising and crashing inside him. There were times Marco wondered if something was wrong with him. Maybe he was sick, but every checkup came back normal. His body was fine. It was his mind that wasn't. He couldn't even put a name to what he was feeling. Was it anxiety, depression, or just plain burnout? Then one day, while sitting by a stream, the spot he often went to for a little peace and quiet, even though he never truly found it, Marco overheard a strange story from a passerby. This person spoke of an old man who lived hidden away in a remote mountain village. He used to be a famous psychologist in the city, someone who had helped many people find peace of mind. The storyteller said, he doesn't really care about the world anymore. He lives simply, surrounded by nature. But if someone comes to him with true sincerity, they might receive something truly precious, a peaceful mind. At first, Marco didn't think much of it. He just listened and let it go. But that night, for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there was someone who understood what was going on in his head. Maybe peace wasn't as far-fetched as he'd always believed. The next morning, without overthinking it, Marco made up his mind. He decided to go. He didn't know exactly where this village was or if the old man even existed. But for the first time in months, he had a reason to step out of the mental spiral he'd been stuck in, even if it was just to chase something that might not be real. What he didn't know was that this journey wouldn't just lead him to a new place. It would lead him back to himself. Marco left home at sunrise, just as the sun peeked over the distant mountain ridges. He carried a small backpack, a few changes of clothes, some dry food, and an old map with a faint mark scribbled on it. No one saw him off. There were no goodbyes, just a young man trying to escape from his own mind. The road into the northern mountains wasn't easy. It twisted and turned, full of rocky paths that sometimes disappeared into dense forest. But to Marco, every step felt like it mattered. It wasn't like the endless mental loops he'd been stuck in. Now he had a goal, a destination, and somehow that made the fatigue easier to bear. On the first day, he passed through terraced rice fields where locals were planting under the gentle morning sun. They looked at him with curiosity, but their eyes were warm. An old woman offered him a bowl of hot porridge. She didn't ask where he was going, just smiled kindly. Marco realized something. When you truly pay attention to the present moment, the world around you feels a little more welcoming. But the higher he climbed, the harder it got. In the days that followed, Marco crossed icy streams, slept in a tent beneath starry skies, and hiked nearly 10 hours some days without seeing another soul. He got lost. He felt discouraged. More than once he asked himself, is this old man even real? Or am I just chasing some empty dream? But every time that thought crept in, something kept him going. Maybe it was the sound of the wind whispering through the treetops, or the way sunlight broke through the morning mist. It was as if they were quietly telling him, be patient. This path doesn't just lead to a person, it leads to something deeper inside you. After nearly a week, Marco reached a scattered little village tucked into the hillside. There were no power lines, no cars, just old wooden houses and the faint scent of wild grass drifting in the breeze. He asked a few locals about the old man and they nodded, as if they had always known someone like him would show up one day. A young boy led him to the last house in the village. It was a tiny, simple home, almost hidden beneath moss-covered branches and trees. On the porch sat an old man, eyes half closed, posture upright, still as stone, yet somehow completely at peace. He didn't speak, but his presence alone made Marco feel something he had never felt before, a strange kind of stillness. Not an empty silence, but one that felt full, like a still lake that reflects everything without needing to hold on to any of it. Marco slowly stepped up the wooden stairs, heart pounding. In a soft voice he said, "Sir, I've come a long way to find you. I can't take it anymore. My mind is always loud. I don't know how to find peace." The old man gently opened his eyes. They were bright and deep, as if they had seen right through every worry the world could throw. He didn't ask where Marco came from. He wasn't surprised. He simply smiled, calm and warm, and said, "You've come to the right place. But before I can help you, you'll need to learn one thing. Something very small, but it might just change everything." Marco didn't quite understand what he meant, but in that moment, he knew he was ready. No more doubt, no more hesitation. He had come too far to turn back now, and even though he didn't know what was waiting for him, he had a feeling. This was the true beginning of the journey inward. Without another word, the old man stood. His movements were slow but steady, like someone who had spent a lifetime walking alongside silence. Marco followed, full of questions. He thought he was about to hear some deep lesson, some profound philosophy. But no. The old man led him to a small open space behind the house. There, beneath the shade of an ancient tree, sat a weathered wooden table. On it was a clear glass. The old man poured water into the glass, slowly, steadily, until it reached the very edge, just a tilt away from spilling over. Then he turned to Marco and said calmly, "Take this glass of water. Walk from here to the village gate and come back. But remember, don't spill a single drop." Marco was stunned. He had expected something bigger, an enlightening conversation, a meditation exercise, or at least some clear piece of advice. But walking with a full glass of water? He didn't get it. Still, the old man's eyes held no trace of mockery or challenge. They were just quiet, as if he had done this with many people before, and none had truly understood the meaning until they experienced it for themselves. Marco nodded and carefully took the glass. He could feel his hand grip slightly, his heart beating a little faster. The glass was delicate, filled to the brim. One wrong move and it would spill. He took the first few steps, slow, steady. The village path wasn't long, but it was filled with little obstacles. Low-hanging branches, uneven rocks, a barking dog somewhere nearby, a few kids laughing and running past. But Marco didn't look at anyone. He didn't really hear anything. His entire focus was on the glass. Every step was a moment of control, every breath a small adjustment. He didn't think about the old man. He didn't think about why he had come. He wasn't caught in the past or anxious about the future. There was only the surface of the water, still delicate, and the hands trying to keep it that way. Time seemed to stop, and somehow he made it back to the porch. The glass was still full, not a single drop spilled. He let out a breath, sweat soaking through the back of his shirt. Marco handed the glass to the old man, a little proud. "I did it," he said. "Not a single drop." The old man nodded. He didn't rush to praise him. Instead, he asked, "On your walk, did you see the children playing by the side of the road?" Marco frowned. "No? Did you hear the dog barking?" Marco shook his head. "No, I was only focused on the glass." The old man smiled, more warmly than ever. "You see? When your mind is fully focused on one single thing, there is no room for extra thoughts, no past, no future, only the present. And in that present, you found stillness." Marco said nothing. It didn't feel like a lesson, it felt like a mirror, showing him something he had never noticed about himself. He realized the glass of water was just an excuse. The real lesson wasn't about the water, it was about how he held it, with awareness, with presence, with complete attention. And for those few minutes, for the first time in a long time, his mind had been quiet. No past to regret, no future to fear. Only the present, clear, pure, and enough. Marco sat down on the wooden steps of the porch. The glass of water no longer mattered. His breathing was still a little heavy from the short walk, but inside there was a strange calm, like the storm in his mind had just passed, leaving a still, quiet lake behind. The old man didn't say anything. He simply sat beside him. The silence between them was full, not the kind that makes you uncomfortable, but the kind that's rare and precious, the kind of silence where you don't need words to be understood. After a few minutes, Marco finally spoke. His voice was soft, almost as if he was afraid to break the moment. "I never imagined I could feel like this, just from something as simple as carrying a glass of water." The old man nodded, his eyes lighting up with a quiet smile. "You've been waiting for peace to come from something big, a magical answer, some kind of awakening. But sometimes what you really need is just to return to the present." Marco looked out at the small dirt road in front of him. He had just walked it, but noticed nothing except the glass in his hands, And yet, instead of feeling regret for having missed something, he felt grateful, because it was through that focus that he saw something clearly for the first time. His mind wasn't broken. It had just never been trained to be still. I always thought peace was something I had to find somewhere out there, Marco continued. But maybe it's been here all along inside me. I just never knew how to reach it. The old man smiled. You don't need to clear your mind to find peace. Sometimes all it takes is realizing where you are, what you're doing, and not getting pulled away by things that aren't real. Marco didn't reply, but inside, every word was clicking into place like pieces of a puzzle. He thought back to all the times his mind had spun out over things that had already happened, or hadn't happened yet. Imaginary arguments, worst-case scenarios that never came true. All of it had stolen away precious moments of the only thing that truly belonged to him, the present. Peace is not about living in a world without noise. It's learning how to be quiet within the noise. Not forcing yourself to stop thinking, but learning to notice when you're thinking, and gently return to where you are. That night, Marco stayed in the village for one more evening. The old man didn't offer any more lessons. He didn't need to. What Marco needed to hear, he had already heard. What he needed to experience, he had already gone through. Before Marco left, the old man said just one thing. You don't need to come back here. Go home and practice that. Where you live, peace is not found on this mountaintop. It's in every breath, every step, every moment when you are truly present. Marco bowed his head, filled with gratitude. There was no ceremony, no ritual, no long goodbye. Just a quiet but profound transformation. As he walked back down the same path, the morning sun bathed the trail in light. The branches still swayed in the breeze, the dogs barked somewhere in the distance, and the children played like they always did. But this time, Marco noticed it all. He paused to listen to the rustling of the leaves. He saw a wildflower growing by the side of the road. He felt the soles of his feet gently touching the earth with every step. No more rushing. No more running from something. No more questions spinning in his head like before. He knew life ahead would still be hard at times. There would be days when his mind would stir up storms again. But unlike before this time, he had a compass, a quiet but steady guide. Come back to the present. No need to meditate in a cave. No need to withdraw from the world. Just do what you're doing, fully. When you're washing the dishes, just wash the dishes. When you're eating, just eat. When you're living, just live. Marco left that village a different person. Not because he had changed everything, but because he had finally learned how to come home to himself. Maybe you don't live in a quiet mountain village like Marco. Your life might be filled with crowded streets, packed schedules, and never-ending notifications. But no matter where you are, no matter what your life looks like, the peace Marco found is already within you, right here, right now. It is not in some faraway place. It does not depend on perfect conditions. It begins when you learn how to truly be present in your own life. You may not go on a journey to meet a wise old man in the mountains, but you can put down your phone for a few minutes, take a deep breath, feel your feet touching the ground, look up at the sky, listen to the wind as it passes by. That alone, just that, and you will begin to feel what Marco felt. Peace is not something to search for. It is something to come home to, and that journey back always begins with this moment. If this story touched something inside you, leave a like and share it with someone who you think is also looking for peace of mind. And if you want to keep walking alongside stories that heal, inspire, and gently remind us of what matters, don't forget to follow this channel. Thank you for staying with me until the end of today's journey. I will see you again in the next story, where together we listen, reflect, and slow down a little in the rush of life. Until then, live a little slower, breathe a little deeper. And always remember, peace has always been right there within you.